Psalm 13, we hear these words. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O God. Lo, Lord my God, light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. The Psalms, of course, friends, are the prayer book of the people of Israel. They're the hymn book of the people of Israel. They're the liturgy that the people of Israel use to worship. And the Psalms are powerful because they're so jolly real. They are very, very real. Whenever we read the Psalms, no matter what Psalm, somewhere in them we will see ourselves. Somewhere in that we will identify that. Many of the Psalms are contributed, of course, to David, King David. And so therefore, remember, as we read through those Psalms, as we read of the highs, as we read of the lows, we're reading of the spiritual journey of the one who was a shepherd boy who became one of the greatest kings in the history of Israel. So this is powerful. And Psalm 13 is one of the many Psalms that are known as Psalms of Lament. How long, O Lord, he cries out. 4 times David repeats this question, how long, O Lord? And the reality is, every child of God has asked that question at one time or another. Let's be real here, because David was being real. Let's sort of, just put aside all of our needs to show demonstrate how spiritual we are, and I'm not saying anyone intentionally do that, but we can sometimes feel the pressure. I certainly did it in my teen years growing up in the church, felt the pressure because now as a Christian I had to have it all together. Let's put it aside and be real. Every follower of Jesus, no matter how strong our faith, has sometimes felt abandoned or neglected or let down by God in one way or another. Every believer at one time or other has felt, hey, we've waited a long time for God to do what needs to be done. And guess what? If you feel this way, what I want to say to you is if you feel this way, it doesn't mean you no longer love God. It doesn't mean you're backsliding. It doesn't necessarily mean you're losing your faith. In fact, Brad last week quoted the great English preacher, the Baptist preacher of the 19th century, Charles Spurgeon. And I want to quote him again. On this psalm he said, if a believer is truly a man or woman after God's own heart, he will at some time find the occasion to use the language of this psalm. So this is a reality. Friends, it's a reality that being a follower of Jesus in a world where there's trouble, being a follower of Jesus as someone who is an imperfect person in relationship with a perfect God, we're going to experience this. And with this real, raw, crying out to God, we gain some insights that can, like David, move us from the lows of despair to the highs of rejoicing like he did. So what I'm going to do today is really, I'm not normally what you call an expository preacher or teacher, but today we're going to unpack this verse by verse by verse to hear what insights we can gain from this, from David's journey. So let's look firstly at 13 verse 1. It's on the screen. How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? As I said, the pain in David's heart came from this sense that God had forgotten him and God was distancing himself from him. And we're the same. We might not say it in that way, but sometimes we think, Lord, I'm missing something here. Lord, did I get it? Lord, I feel disconnected with you at the moment. What's going on? Here's the reality, friends. David felt that way, yes, but the Lord did not forget David. The Lord did not hide his face from David, but David felt like he did. I'll say that again. The Lord did not neglect David. The Lord had not hidden his face from him, but David felt like he had. You know, as human beings, when we have such strong and powerful feelings, they're so strong they feel like they're true. So, in that sense, it was true for David. But it was true according to his feelings, not according to fact. And so here's the first thing we need to really understand, and that is how to deal with feelings. On the one hand, on the one extreme, I've come across followers, genuine, very sincere followers of Jesus, who on the one hand, on the one extreme, feel they've got to ignore their feelings. That feelings have nothing to do with our relationship with God. You know, on extreme, there's a view that you can't possibly get angry with God, or you can't feel anger or doubt, or because you're not spiritual if you feel those things. Come on, don't be sad, don't be angry, you just got to trust God. But friends, sincere as that is, it actually creates a very false view of what a Christian should be like. Nowhere in the scriptures does it say to be a follower of Jesus, we have to be happy and joyful 24/7, 365. That's not real. That's not real. Because what happens when we follow that extreme and deny and repress our feelings? I can't feel that, I've got to trust God, I've got to have faith, I've got to rejoice, I've got to pray all the time. What happens is, those feelings, when we do that, don't go away. They're just repressed. And repressed. And repressed. And the more hits we take, the more things happen to make us feel that way and feel angry or sad or neglected or confused, and the more we don't repress them, what happens? They're not going away. They are like a active volcano within us, simmering away. And if we don't deal with them, we continue to press them, all it's going to do is take one more hit, someone's going to say something, something's going to happen, and what happens to that volcano? It erupts. It erupts. You see, and that's not good. It's not good for the person who pushed that button, and it's not good for us. You see, it's a false view of feelings. Feelings aren't to be repressed, people. Why? Because remember, we're made in the image of God. We are made in the image of God, which means God has given us feelings as an expression of His image of us. So we can feel anger, we can feel sorry, we can feel all those things, because guess what? God feels those feelings. Feelings are a gift from God, a sign that we are made in His image. And so if we repress those feelings, not only we are not being true to ourselves and true to how the Lord made us, but it is actually dangerous to our mental health. God gave us that gift to express it. So what I'm saying is, like David, when we face those times, like him, we need to be free to express it to God. How long ago, God? Lord, what's going on here? God, I don't understand. It is okay to express how we feel. However, on the other extreme to ignoring and repressing our feelings, the other extreme is those who allow our lives to be ruled by our feelings. People who do that believe whatever reality their feelings present them. So if I'm feeling it, it must be real and it must be true. And the problem with that extreme, friends, is that yes, while we have feelings because we're made in the image of God, our feelings are also affected by our fallenness. Our feelings, while a gift from God, are also affected by the fact that we are fallen beings. We are sinful beings. Yeah, we're created in the image of God, but we're born into sin. And therefore that means those feelings, while from God, can be distorted. So it was right for David to feel how he felt, and it was right for him to express that to the Lord, but not to accept that that is reality, infallible truth. Understand what I'm saying? Because how often, let's just look at this, how often, say, has someone said something to hurt you, and you think, you know, just, how could they possibly say that to me? How could they mean that? And you said, and really upset and hurt, and the more you think about it, the more hurt you get. And if you actually do, rather than repress it, talk to them about it, they say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. And when you hear what they said, you think, oh, man, did I get that wrong? Has anyone decided to be in that situation? Or have you undoubtedly, someone's been upset with something you said, and you go, what did I say? What happened? That's what happens. Because, see, feelings are filtered through our system of beliefs based on our past experiences of life and everything like that, and that's what will happen. So feelings, yeah, we feel them, they're very real, we need to talk, we need to express them, but just don't accept that they're infallible truth. With me so far? So they're the two extremes. So let's go on and see where David goes with this. Because after this, he says, how long? And because if we look at verse 2 then, we see David's mistake. He says, how long must I take counsel in my own soul and have sorrow in my heart all day? How long will my enemies be exalted over me? Look at that. How long, he says to the Lord, shall I take counsel in my own soul and have sorrow in my heart? Friends, no wonder David got discouraged. Because when you're struggling with feelings of despair and neglect and hurt and disillusionment, the last thing you should be doing is taking counsel in your own soul. You know what I mean? You know, he was looking inwards. He was looking inwards. He was trying to work it out for himself. And what happens, the more we do that, the more we mull over our discouragement or neglect or hurt or disappointment, the bigger and bigger and bigger it grows. What we focus on, we're going to get more of and more of. Those feelings will only magnify. Think about it. How often has that happened? If you say you've got a problem or something you're anxious about or struggling with, what happens? The more you focus on it, the more you mull it over, the more it preoccupies you. Whereas if we're able to not be governed by our feelings, but in those situations turn it around and pray about it, focus on God rather than on the problems, focus not denying them, but just not giving them voice. Okay, Lord, and focus on Him and try to focus on His faithfulness and His graciousness. The more we do that, that's when faith will build. You know, it doesn't mean the feelings go away when we do this. But, you know, when we do that, what we're doing, we're sending a message to our brain. No, I manage my feelings, they don't manage me. You know, thinking about problems is actually really hard work. It's actually really hard work. I love this. Someone once said, trouble is often a pill we have to swallow, but we make it worse by keeping it in our mouth and chewing it. Trouble is a pill we often have to swallow. We make it worse by keeping it in our mouth and chewing it. So taking counsel in our own soul, focusing on ourselves, is like a self-torture. It will keep going and building. What else did David say? Then he said, how long shall my enemy be exalted over me? So this sense of my enemy's winning was only magnifying his feelings of depression. You see, this would have been stressing David to the eyeballs, because remember, David knew he was called by God. David knew the call of God on his life. David knew he was anointed by Samuel for a high calling. And so in this sense, David's enemies were also the Lord's enemies, and were the enemies of the people of God. So David would have been really overwhelmed and feeling that his enemy was winning. And it's the same with us. Now, our enemies may not be actual people like David. They could be. But sadly, many of our enemies are things like doubt and fear. You know, how often you heard people say, I'm losing the battle with depression, or I'm losing the battle with alcohol, or I'm losing the battle with drugs. I'm losing. That means, you know, the enemy's winning. They feel the enemy's winning. And with David, this sense of the enemy prevailing only heightened his sense of being downcast, only heightened his sense that he was being overwhelmed. So, you know, what causes, let's just think a moment, how does this come about? What causes these feelings of depression? I think being aware of it is really important, understanding ourselves. And the reality is there's a number of reasons why depression or feelings of depression and anxiety come. One is temperament. The reality is we're all wired differently, and some people have a temperament that is more prone to depression. Okay, that's a reality. It's not a bad thing, that's just the way they are. Those sort of personalities have many other wonderful strengths, but it's just being aware. That means being aware of it and needing to manage it. Some are more sensitive to that than others. So temperament is one. Another is illness. You know, if you've really battled a physical illness for a long time, it can just get you down, can't it? You just never seem to get over it. When you're feeling physically weak, it can make you more sensitive to just feeling really down. Well then, if it's not actual illness, another one is exhaustion. You know, if you're really, really exhausted, you know, you've been burning the candle at both ends, stuff's been happening, you haven't had enough sleep, you're going to be more sensitive to that. You're going to be, you know, you're going to react more. Or am I the only one who tends to more prone to overreact when I'm really tired? Am I the only one? It's reality, isn't it? Okay. What's another one that can lead to it? This is not necessarily illness or exhaustion, but success. A letdown after a great effort. You know, a great effort, a great victory, the letdown. Of course, the example of that is we've seen in recent times some of our elite athletes, swimmers and elite sports people, and some have been really open to the battle with depression after they're no longer up there, then they retire. There's nowhere. It's like a letdown after such an incredible achievement. That can be open to that. It can be just a blatant spiritual attack. You know, the thief comes to rob, kill and destroy, and sometimes it can be a great spiritual attack. But as Daphne some years ago coined the phrase, the enemy rides on the back of other things. So illness, temperament, exhaustion and all that can be something that Satan can use to push us down. We need to be aware of that. Okay, so David may have made a mistake by taking counsel in his own soul, but how did he turn it around? He cried out to God. He got through. He cried out to God. Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. David stopped taking counsel in his own soul. He stopped looking inwardly and he cried out to God. Consider and answer me, O God. He wasn't meaning two different things there when he said consider and answer me. He was doing a thing that the Hebrews did a lot, and they use repetition. Consider and answer me. David desperately cried out to God. asking the Lord to hear him. David felt as if God wasn't listening. Will you forget me forever? But now, in spite of that, in spite of how he felt, he turned it around, he looked to God, he continued to cry out. And friends, God is honoured when we persistently and desperately cry out to him. Desperate prayer has power. I'm absolutely convinced that persistent, desperate prayer has power. Not because we're trying to persuade a reluctant God. No, God's not like that. God doesn't need us to persuade him, but rather when we desperately, persistently cry out to God, that demonstrates to God that we are passionate about the things that God is passionate about. That we're aligning our hearts with his hearts. We desire our will to be aligned with him. And then, you know, I'd never really picked this up before. Maybe I just haven't, you know, I've read this psalm a lot, but perhaps not in the depth. But look at this next slide. He said, "Consider and answer me, O God." And then he says, "Light up my eyes." Consider and answer me, O God, Lord, light up my eyes. This is a very powerful prayer. Light up my eyes, or some translations say, enlighten my eyes. So David clearly at this point had the wisdom or the revelation or the insight to know that despite these powerful feelings he was feeling, it wasn't reality. He needed a different perspective. And so he prayed, Lord, enlighten my eyes. Lord, light up my eyes. What a great prayer to pray when we're feeling down, when we're feeling confused. The issue is not with God, it's with us. If something's going wrong with us, if something's going wrong with the world, it's not because God's messed it up, because he's the all-powerful, all-knowing present with God. If there is an issue, despite how we feel, we're the ones with the problem, not God. We need help. We need understanding. So to pray, Lord, enlighten my eyes. That's why the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 1, I believe, when he was praying for the Christians, Ephesians 1, 17 to 19, listen to this, he prayed that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him, having the eyes of your heart enlightened, that you may know what is the hope to which he has called you, what are the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and what is the immeasurable greatness of his power towards us who to believe according to the working of his great might. Praying that the eyes of our heart may be enlightened. What we can easily do is, as I said, we can wallow in a sense of self-doubt and what's going on. Yeah, Lord, be real to him. As I said, cry out, Lord, what's happening here? But then, like David, pray, Lord, I need to understand something I don't understand at the moment, so enlighten my eyes. Help me understand, Lord. And then, why? Lest I sleep the sleep of death. This is where it gets serious. Lest I sleep this, Lord, help me understand. Lord, I cry out to you, lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Why? Because here's the blatant truth. If we're not enlightened, we'll fall asleep. And tragically, spiritual sleep can lead to spiritual death. And what a tragedy it is. I think all of us have known the pain of knowing people who've loved the Lord with a passion and just fallen away. It breaks our hearts, doesn't it, when we see people who've been so alive in the faith and just, they're existing, but they're spiritually dead compared with what they were. This is what happens when we continue to believe the deceptions, the lies of our own heart, the distortions there that the enemy would love to put into us, further away from God. That's why we need to pray, Lord, continue to enlighten our eyes. That's why Paul, I believe, said in Ephesians 5 verse 14, awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. So, why is this so important? I love this. David says, lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. lest my foes rejoice as I am shaken. In other words, David knew that the worst part of losing to anyone was hearing them boast that they've defeated you. Isn't that true? You ever been in a race as a kid, and you know that person who you intensely disliked won, and again he rubs salt in the wound by letting you know that he's better than you? Oh, we hate that. But it's the same with our real enemy. Because you know, the kid that was being obnoxious, he's not our real enemy. Because we only have one enemy, don't we? And that's the enemy. We don't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing us down. And that was David's motivation, to turn to the Lord, to draw strength from him, to cry out from him, lest the enemy say, "Ha, I've won." And that's our motivation for continuing to talk to the Lord and growing to him. There's too much at stake here. It's not only about us, but how then, if we find ourselves in that space, in that state, then God uses us to bless others. And not only are we robbed, but others are robbed through us when we're in that state. Who remembers Reinhard Bonnke? That name, that you don't hear of him much now. He'd be quite old now, but that amazing evangelist in Africa. Very, very anointed ministry in the 80s and 90s. And I remember and boy oh boy did the enemy hit him so many times. In the early 80s he was still using tents. Towards the 90s he just did open air, but they couldn't fit in tents. You know, tent that fit 10,000, 20,000. You know, a tent that seated 100,000 people where they needed 18 semi-trailers to take it around. And but so many of those tents the enemy destroyed in storms. You know, but he would just build another one. And I remember reading his autobiography, Plundering Hell, where he talked about he just, the enemy destroyed a tent and he just built another one even bigger. And they were there and they were all set up for the rally, and this incredible storm. They could see the dark clouds coming before him. And he tells that story. He said, holy anger rose up. And he said, "Devil, I want to talk to you. If you destroy this tent, I'm going to build another one twice the size." And this phenomenal miracle, all there watched the clouds, these dark clouds, part that way and go completely around them. And of course he praised the Lord. And then he turned and he said, "Devil, I want to talk to you again. I just want to make it clear, I don't make deals with you. I'm still going to build one twice the size." And he did. And he raised the money. He was not... Now, you know, that's a phenomenal miracle, and that's what happens there. But we can easily say, well, I just don't see miracles in that. Yes, you do. Because God will do that. This is our motivation. Too much is at stake here. We don't want to see Satan have the upper hand. That's why we don't look to him, we look to the Lord. What did I just do there? "But," says David, "I have trusted in your steadfast love." Here is the key. This is what helped turn David around. He trusted in the Lord's steadfast love. When we are feeling down, confused, struggling, where are you, Lord? It's his steadfast love we need to trust in. This is not a time to trust in his judgment. He is judge. This is not a time to trust in his holiness. He is holy. This is a time to trust in his steadfast love. What do I mean by that? I mean, I've just come across Christians that, oh, you know, I shouldn't be feeling this way. God's going to judge me. Oh, I shouldn't be. I'm so sinful in the place of a holy God. There's place for that. But when we're feeling down, the Lord's arms are open wide. This is a time for celebrating the truth that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. This is what he wants us to do. In those times where we're struggling, God's love abides. The greatest gift of all is love. God is love. And that's what David found in those times of discouragement. That's where we need to trust in his steadfast love. No matter what we face, God's love's there. And look what began to happen. What comes next? He says, my heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. Now, David was directing his feelings instead of his feelings directing him. He told his heart to get busy rejoicing. And what did he rejoice in? In your salvation. And we're the people of God. We are people of grace. We are those by grace you have been saved by faith. So no matter what you're experiencing, no matter what you're getting through, this is the one thing that the enemy can't take from you. If you might not, there might be have stuff happening in your life that you have trouble rejoicing in, but the one thing you can continue to rejoice in is the salvation that Jesus bought for you on the cross of Calvary. That's done. That can't be taken away. That you can always rejoice in, no matter what's going on. So get busy rejoicing. This is the solid ground for every believer. Our salvation. We don't earn it. It's God's gift to us. And David started rejoicing, and he says, I will sing to the Lord. Why? Because singing is such a beautiful, powerful way of expressing joy, of expressing love, of expressing faith. That's why I wanted to have our extended time of worship following the word today, that we can spend that time rejoicing. David was a great worshipper, he was a great worship leader, and David moved from feeling depressed and feeling abandoned by God to singing for joy. I guess in a way, maybe he had the revelation, because, to be abandoned, you need someone to be abandoned by. And so maybe David worked that out. Hey, no, stop, I might feel in this way, but God, I really do know you're there. And look at faith begin to rise. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. See what happens where our eyes are enlightened? Suddenly we begin to remember. When David was there, how long? He was only, all he could see was all the things that were messed up. But when his eyes were enlightened, his vision widened, suddenly he could remember and see all the times of God's goodness, of God's faith, of God's miracles, of God's love, of all the times when God has dealt bountifully with me. It's amazing how we forget those times when we're wallowing of our sense of despair, don't we? But when David's eyes were enlightened, he could see, because he has dealt bountifully with me. The more David thought about it, the more he said, I've got good reason for joy. My God's a good God. My God is the God of everlasting love and faithfulness. And that's the same with us. Regardless of what we're experiencing, if we can turn to the Lord, if we can choose, and it is a choice, not to allow our feelings to guide and direct and govern us, but through faith, even if we're still feeling like that, looking to the Lord, crying out to him, trusting to him, praying, enlighten my eyes, give me revelation, then begin through our focus to see from God's perspective and see his faithfulness. That then we're on a roll. That creates a synergy that will keep building and keep building and keep building. What a transition in that psalm. In those few short verses, David began by being overwhelmed by his feelings and believing that God had forgotten him and God was hidden from him, yet now he could see God had dealt bountifully with him. His eyes were enlightened. So what's the learning from us, to summarise, friends? Before the Lord can enlighten our eyes, we have to begin and agree that we just don't see everything. Intellectually we know that, but what happens when we allow ourselves to really get overwhelmed, we can easily lose that perspective. We need to realise that while our feelings are real, and a gift from God, not to be repressed but to be shared, but nevertheless acknowledge our feelings are not giving us full and accurate information. They're not. And if we recognise this, and if we think, well, I'm mulling over this, in other words, I'm taking counsel in my own soul, I need to turn this around, Lord, enlighten my eyes, light up my eyes, help me see this from your perspective. I'm seeing and feeling stuff that's not from you. I need to turn this around and keep doing so. Like David, we will move from a place of despair to a place of confidence. When we choose to read the Word, sometimes reading the Word is just sheer, unadulterated, flippant hard work. Other times it's enriching, but when we do, in spite of how we feel, believe it or not, you may not feel anything, but you are still reading the living and active Word of God. And Paul says in Romans 10, verse 17, faith comes from hearing and hearing the Word of Christ. So we're building our faith and we are moving ourselves from that place of despair to that place of hope. Amen.